Welcome to Open Plaza Talks, created by the Hispanic Theological Initiative. Each episode focuses on a topic that matters to you, whether you are in the field, the academy, or the clergy. Today, we bring you a conversation between Dr. Sammy Alfaro and Dr. Chloe Sun about theological education in the diaspora. For more information about today's talk, please visit us at htiopenplaza.org.
Welcome to HTI Open Plaza podcast. My name is Sammy Alfaro. I'm professor of theology at Grand Canyon University and pastor of Iglesia Nuevo Dia, New Day Church in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm here today with Chloe Sun, who is professor of Old Testament at Logos Evangelical Seminary. Today, we are going to talk about her wonderful book, Attempt Great Things for God, Theological Education in Diaspora. So before we fully focus on your book, Chloe, can you tell us about yourself and your theological pilgrimage?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this podcast. My name is Chloe Sun. I was born in China and I grew up in Hong Kong, and I came to the States for college and then became a Christian. And that changed the trajectory of my life. So after college, I went to seminary to pursue theological education. And through that journey, I learned more about myself and more about God. And I wanted to teach at seminary to form, to equip future ministers for the church. So that would be a brief introduction of who I am. And in this process of finding my vocation, I struggled with the question of who am I really, in terms of my identity, my ethnic, my cultural identity, and my spiritual identity. And so it took me a while to figure that out. And in this process of trying to figure out who I am, I've come across different books on spiritual formation, on identity formation. And so I'm really interested in knowing more about how a person who is, a hybrid of different cultural elements, how does this kind of person fit in theological education? Because it's not totally white or black. I'm not even Asian American, but I'm not an international student anymore. And so sometimes it's complicated. So my theological pilgrimage is to find that identity in God's kingdom and to embrace it and to share it with those who have struggles about who they are in this journey of theological education.
Just listening to you speak about your background and your, way into theological education, Chloe, reminded me of how there's a lot of similarities between your context and our Latinx context. We live our lives trying to figure out who we are. And I heard somebody once say that writing a book or writing a dissertation is sort of like writing biography, right? Because you end up getting to know more about yourself, more about your culture. So another question for you would be this. So what led you to write this book in particular? What did you hope to accomplish?
Those are good questions. Well, let's see. Well, this book is a part of the series, TEBT, Theological Education Between the Times series. And I was one of a part of 12 people in this group. And I was someone in the group that started out as a unique, teaching in a unique context, let me put it this way. So as I look at other people in the group, there's Asian American, and there is also African American, there is the traditional Caucasian, and then there is also out of the box contexts such as those schools who are not seeking for accreditation. So there are a range of diversity in this group. And I try to see myself, how am I fit in? And then I realized that my school is very unique in this context of theological education. And I should write about something about my school and its story, and to let the world know this is happening in the US. What's happening in my school, it's also a part of the story in the American history as well. So that's the motivation to tell the story from the perspective of my school, and how it contributes to the larger work of theological education and religion in America.
That's great. I think most of our listeners and viewers are probably Googlers like myself. So as soon as I heard you mention that this was part of a series, I actually went to Amazon, looked it up, and I saw that our very own Elizabeth Conde Frazier also has a book in the same series that came out both in Spanish and English. So, people might want to look for others in these series and see how they're all really, helping to contribute to the landscape of theological education.
Right.
Chloe, so you probably don't know this about me, but I am the product of a Hispanic Bible Institute. And so the title of your book reminded me of our president's motto. So back then when I was at the Hispanic Bible Institute, our president had this motto, and it was, "Con la ayuda de Dios haremos proezas." With God's help, we will do great things, which is actually very similar to the title of your wonderful book, Attempt Great Things for God. I want you to speak to us about the promise of grassroots theological education for the greater evangelical community.
That's a big question. Well, first of all, let me say something about the title of the book, Attempt Great Things for God, expect great things from God. It's actually from William Carey, the missionary. And this phrase was adopted by the first president of my school. And he uses that as his motto, and then later on as the motto for the whole school. So the whole spirit of attempt great things for God is out of one's desire to do something for God, because realizing that the God we serve is a great God. Back to your question about the grassroots contribution to the whole evangelical movement, I think, well, let's define what do you mean by grassroots? Because in my context and in your context may be a little different. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah.
By grassroots.
Yeah. So for me, like grassroots and going to a Bible Institute for the beginning of my pastoral formation, it was actually an unaccredited Bible Institute. And so I was really going more for like vocational formation. I had felt a call to ministry. At the time, I really didn't know how far my studies would take me. And, 10 years after that, I was doing a PhD. And 18 years after that, I find myself teaching at a theological institution. That wasn't originally the plan, but it was more kind of like a grassroots approach to equipping young people for the work of ministry, going back to the church and really wanting to serve God. And so as I read your book, I found myself kind of like just drawn back to my formative experience in those early years and how different it was in comparison to later on when I went to seminary and especially when I did my PhD work.
Okay. At my school, we have degree programs and non-degree programs. So the grassroots movement would be more for the non-degree programs. But a lot of people from that non-degree programs, they later on will move on to the degree programs and to pursue the MDiv, or a few went to other schools and did their Eerdmans and PhDs. So I think I'm an immigrant, and the context of my school is an immigrant school. It is also a diasporic school because we train students who are from all over the world, and then upon graduation, they will be going to like different parts of the world as well. And so through this whole process, this movement, we are contributing to the whole Christianization in a global way. I'm not sure if I respond to your question.
Yeah, well, let me read something from your book on page 37. You mention Dr. Liu, who is Felix Liu, who is the founder of Logos Evangelical Seminary, and you explain it like this. You say, for Liu, theological education went beyond mere knowledge to integrating that knowledge into real life and ministry practices. The meaning of theological education then is first and foremost to transform the lives of students by encouraging them to develop a healthy and vibrant relationship with God, as well as build a solid foundation of biblical principles, and then applying that knowledge in one's ministry context. And when I read that, I was like, you know what, that was very much my formative experience at the Bible Institute. But what I noticed later on when I continued in my studies, that more and more, I guess you could describe it that, I kind of became more of a professional student of, scripture and ministry. And at times I actually lost touch of that personal relationship with God, which it seems that at Logos, it's something that continues along that trajectory of your theological education. So could you say something more about that?
I think a lot of schools or students will turn into professional students and professors and divorce from the church and divorce from a vibrant relationship with God. And this is something that Felix Liu would try to avoid because theological education for him is basically having a healthy relationship with God. And knowledge for him, theological knowledge is not the most important thing, because knowledge would make one pops up, but it is love that builds up, and love involves loving one another, and this loving one another comes from one's intimate relationship with God. So that aspect, the personal relationship with God, is a very important element in the ethos of the school. And it's a constant reminder for myself too, because I like to write, I like teaching and all that, but then I have to be reminded that I need to maintain that vibrant relationship with God, so that my scholarship would be life-giving and not just knowledge only.
I love that. I love that because it's something that I have really, prided myself on. Throughout my theological studies, I continue to serve the church. I am a pastor, and it's by design, right? I always wanted for these two realms to be connected. I think sometimes, and you mentioned the word divorce, right? How sometimes we seem to divorce our academia from the church, when in reality, they really should be connected. And some of that vision I see in Liu's approach to founding Logos Seminary. So what might you say would be the main challenges that lose vision for theological education aim at dominant models of Christian higher education? In other words, how is Logos doing things differently that it poses a challenge for the dominant models of Christian higher education, so we could actually do different things in our more traditional institutions, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Well, I like my school, but no school is perfect. We do have our challenges. At the founding of the school, we made a position that we would use Mandarin as our instructional language. Actually, originally it was Taiwanese, and then later on it changed to Mandarin because our target students were immigrant students who came to this country from different parts of Asia, and they were not able to use English perfectly if they were going to a Western American school. And so there is a place for a school like Logos. But then by using Mandarin as our instructional language, that also limits students who do not speak Mandarin. They just can't come. They can come, but they won't understand. They won't be able to learn and study with other students. So that itself is innovative in a way because it creates a space for the immigrant students whose main language is Mandarin, but then also limiting other students at the same time. So that's one challenge. Another challenge related to that is the second generation ministry. For immigrants, second generations are usually English speaking. And so if a school is primarily Mandarin based, then it's really hard to reach out to the second generation, which is, a great challenge.
Mm.
Yeah, what about...
So I guess
okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious about your context. What about, in your experience, is there a context where you use Spanish as the instructional language, or in your ministry at church, is it in Spanish or is it bilingual? Or I'm just curious.
Yeah, so teaching at Grand Canyon, University, I mean, I don't have any opportunities to teach in Spanish. Having gone to the Bible Institute, that was actually all in Spanish, which I was listening to you talk about, the challenge for second generation, perhaps not like non-Mandarin speakers. And I had that challenge myself when I went to the Bible Institute. It was all in Spanish. Now, I spoke Spanish because of my church and my parents, but I didn't know how to write Spanish because I did all my schooling here in the States, right? And so I actually had to learn to write in Spanish at the Bible Institute. And it was actually a great way for me to pick up the language, and then now in my professional life to continue to write and publish in Spanish. As far as the church, we actually, the majority of my parishioners are actually Spanish speaking. We do have plenty of like second, third generation Latin, people who speak English, or they're more like bilingual, or a little bit more dominant. I think, especially second, third generation. My kids who are 14 and 15 now, they obviously prefer English, and so at our church we had to make a decision early on whether we would do Spanish-speaking services or if we would do it bilingual. And so from day one, we went bilingual. We even, at times did separate services, Spanish and English. And then we actually went back to the more bilingual mode. So I preach in Spanish and English. I translate for myself, and so I have a lot of fun with it, because at times I could be preaching something in English using a little bit more of an illustration that is more adaptable for an English audience, and then my Spanish translation for that is going to be more focused on the Spanish audience, right? So I'm guessing we have a lot of similarities with our background, and even now, seeing our second and third generation young people at our church, in the process of rethinking our like Bible Institute sort of like church education for leaders. If we were to start something now for our church leaders, would I do it in Spanish or English? If I did it in Spanish, would I limit our second and third generation young people from participating, or should we choose to actually do it in English, right? So I'm kind of like in that
I see
quandary right now.
Yeah, actually related to what you're talking about is as I was trying to write this book, and I was thinking most of my people or my school may not be able to read it because it was written in English. Some of the constituencies of my school, like the donors, may not be able to read it. And so the project leader decided to translate this book into Chinese as well, so that way, both sides, whether it's English or Chinese speaking, they will be able to read this book. And the same with Elizabeth's book too. It will be translated into Spanish.
That's great to hear that, because I always get the same kind of little bit of pushback or critique, right? Most of my publications are in English. And some have asked me, well, when are you going to do this in Spanish, right? And so if we are serving our churches, how should we continue to really, make sure that our publications are in both languages, right? So I'm really happy to hear that it's also going to be coming out in Mandarin. That's awesome.
Yeah, there are some similarities between the Hispanic American context and in the Chinese American context.
Yeah, I always think back to like Acts chapter 6 and the issue that the early church had with the Hebrew-speaking widows and the Greek-speaking widows, and which ones would be served, right? And I always and I kind of like translate that for myself and ask myself, okay, am I mostly focused on the my Latins, mainly, population, serving them? What if people from other cultural backgrounds are coming into my church? How do I make sure that I'm serving them? And the other complexity is even, and I'm sure you spoke also about the hybridity of your own background, right? So in our church, even though we're a Hispanic church, we have Salvadorans, Guatemalans, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, right? And so which of these constituencies are we going to serve more, right? And you also have like a very hybrid background. Could you speak to us a little bit of that and how it has influenced your work as a scholar?
Okay. Well, as I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, I was born in China, grew up in Hong Kong, and then came to the States. And then I married Asian American, and then I've been teaching at a Taiwanese-based school. And so all those cultural mixture confused my identity. And so I've come to a point where now I position myself as a person of the Chinese diaspora. I'm not just one or the other. And that, I think, helps me to place myself in different contexts, and then knowing that my identity is fluid. I am Chinese, and I'm a part of American. I'm a part of Chinese American, but I'm also Hong Kongese. And I'm, yeah, just all everything. And I'm a Christian.
It reminds me of I had this family that goes to my church that really like challenges me as a pastor, right? So the parents, they are both first generation Mexican like immigrants to the States. You know, they met in Mexico and then they immigrated here to the Phoenix area. Well, their kids grew up here. One, their son is actually married to a Black woman. The other son currently is dating a white woman, and the daughter is now dating an Asian American man, right? And so just within that family, you have all of that
Yeah.
ability, and they come to my church, and I have to figure out, okay, how do I serve this family, right?
Right.
And obviously, if I only spoke in Spanish, I would be doing a terrible job of ministering to that family.
Mhm.
So well, I have one more question for you.
Mhm.
So in the last two chapters of your book, you write about redefining diversity and reimagining theological education on that basis.
Mhm.
So what are the main takeaways listeners will find? In other words, tease the listener, tease the viewer a bit so that they will actually go and buy your book.
Okay. Okay. I really like the way how you framed all the questions, by the way, including this one. So usually when we talk about diversity, we think about race or ethnicity. Do you know there are other ways to define diversity? Would that be a tease?
That's a great tease.
If you want to know, then read my book. Okay, that's one. So a lot of times diversity is beyond what our eyes can see. The word diversity is more rich and complex than just what appeared, that what we can see like from our eyes. So that's, if you want to know more, then my book would talk more about that. And then as for the future of theological education, as we all know, things keep changing, especially after the pandemic. Everything changes, including theological education. And so in this uncertain or ongoing changing context, how does Hispanic diaspora or the Chinese diaspora fit in this global landscape of theological education? I'm trying to converse with the larger world, the larger context from where I am. So that will be the last chapter of the book about the future of theological education. It has to be something different from what we experienced in the past or even in the present. And it would be a more global and hopeful future that includes all languages and all races and ethnicity, because that is to prepare the coming of God's kingdom, the second coming of Jesus. So everything is moving towards that global direction and inclusivity.
Yes, so I think that's a wonderful way to end our discussion today, right? Because you really gave us hope that theological education could be something more than it was in the past, right? I think in the past, many of us as minoritized scholars really struggled to get a foot into the academy, and it's just wonderful to be able to have this conversation with you today, celebrate your wonderful book, and I'm really hoping that many will out there, watching the video will go and buy the book now.
Thank you so much, Sammy.
So thank you for joining us in the HTI Open Plaza podcast. It's been great to talk to you about this great book that we're going to pitch one last time, Attempt Great Things for God, by Chloe Sun, who was here today and gave us some wonderful conversation about her book and story.
Thank you, Sammy, for your time and for your intelligent questions. I enjoy our time.
And so did I. I look forward to just, engaging in conversation more with you in the future.
This has been an HTI production. For more information, visit us at htiopenplaza.org. The Hispanic Theological Initiative provides Open Plaza as a public service. The views expressed by the guests are their own. Their appearance on this program or any reference to a specific product or entity they represent does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by HTI.